Welcome to a very special evening of Film and Theology. I'm James, and just looking forward to something a little bit different tonight. Normally, we watch a film and exposit its narrative themes, its parallels to the story that some of us, like I, hold dearest to my heart. We look for spiritual themes, we look for what the director may be saying, or maybe what may be being communicated just because of the worldviews we embrace or the way we receive it as viewers. But tonight, we're going to do a little bit of an experiment because we actually have a special guest, which we'll be bringing up after the film, and we're going to be blessed by having Aaron White with us. Give it up for Aaron White. All right, so normally we would just hear from one person and sort of then have some dialogue afterwards, but even within the realm of using a spiritual basis or foundation, it's possible to watch a film and get some different perspectives. In fact, I remember growing up on a classic duo, Siskel and Ebert. Some of you might remember. Anybody watch Siskel and Ebert growing up? There's a couple, a few. We've got young people in the audience who are like, we have no idea who that is. Some of us were weaned on their film criticism. And the most exciting part was when they would disagree. Thumbs up, thumbs down. And even when you can agree that there's some interesting themes to discuss, the merit may or may not be there for you. So we're actually going to have a little bit of debate on the merits of the film we're watching this evening. And thankfully, Aaron White is not new to film criticism, as he not only hosts the podcast Feel and Film, which you can find out at feelandfilm.com. You should check out that podcast, but also gets to review films and blog and do other things with that as well. So we are blessed by having him with us here tonight, although we might disagree, and so we'll have to see who has the better view of this film, and maybe we'll let the audience or the viewer decide. You can have your own subjective opinion, even though I will win. So, he's not up here, he can't say anything yet. So, we're going to watch a little film called La La Land, and that was a film that won Best Picture. It almost won Best Picture. And too soon. I'm sorry, but we're going to watch this film in its entirety, and then we're going to dig into the music, the lyrics, the themes, the characters, and what was undeniably a controversial ending. So I will pray, and we will get going, and then afterwards, Aaron and I will duke it out, or dance it out. So join me in a word of prayer as we thank God for our time. God, we think that we can just come together and we can experience film that we can think, we can feel. We can experience a narrative crafted by some definite talent, not only in the directing, cinematography, definitely the acting. And we think of the passion that we do see, even as we differ on the merits of themes or the strength of the theme or what it's even trying to say. I pray that you'd let us use our minds to not be mindless in our consumption, but to consume it with the same amount of passion to learn and to grow as the passion that was put into crafting it. We recognize you as a creator of passion as well. So as we are engaging this, help us to see not just what the director intends, but maybe how it aligns with things that you communicate to us daily, regularly, in your word, and even through creation, and even through the creativity of artists, when sometimes we are not paying attention. So help us pay attention for your glory in your name. Amen. Oh yeah, sorry. All right, everybody, let's welcome up Aaron. He's doing the film. Oh yeah, you gotta use this. Or we could just pass this one back and forth like a baton. So one of us just drops the mic.
Oh, that's great. Wow.
Good to go?
Yeah.
Well, before we get into this, before we get into your love of La La Land, how'd you get into Feel and Film? Maybe just let everybody know.
Yeah, so actually, you have a role in that. Years ago, when I was just a lover of movies like most of us start off as, I found James's podcast series from back when he was a pastor before Refuge, and he was doing film and theology at another church. I found
Years ago.
Yeah, and it got me really excited about looking at movies in a different way. And so I was seeking out film and theology and just trying to, I read Cinema God, his book, and tried to change the way, a little plug, right? Tried to change the way that I watch movies. And over time, it just became more and more of a passion, and it got to the point where my best friend and I talked about it, and we were like, you know, we really want to talk about movies and try to promote movies that, in a way that people tend to not do these days in culture. A lot of people enjoy to tear down movies that they don't like instead of just celebrating the ones they do. And so that's kind of how it came about. My best friend and I started just talking about movies and decided to record it a couple times, and it's grown since then and led to a fun hobby.
Awesome. Keep it up a little higher up here. You're nice.
A little higher.
There you go.
I'm used to my mic not moving in front of me when I podcast. It just sits there, so I don't have to hold it.
It's yours now.
Yeah.
It has power. Feel it. So, you've seen this movie, is this be the 13th time?
13, yes.
All right. And you started a podcast to celebrate film instead of tearing it down, so I thought I'd bring you on so I could tear it down. So we differed on this movie a little bit, but before we get into where we maybe don't agree, let's talk about what there is to love. You actually laid out a lot of fascinating things about this movie. Lay out, at least aesthetically, technically, what did you enjoy?
Well, so the first time I saw this, I will tell you, it was an advanced screening. This was before I became a member of the Seattle Press and got to go to these things all the time for free. I had to stand in a line 3 hours in order to see this. I think it was 2 days early at the time. And I saw it with a friend. It was in the very back of the theater, and they were packed. They actually had to turn people away, which is very rare. They don't usually have to do that, but these screenings, they just print an unlimited number of tickets, and so it's who gets there first. And they turned people away because there were so many people there to see this movie. And what I remember the most is just that opening number. So when Another Day of Sun comes on, and the CinemaScope screen widens in front of you, I felt a joy that I just don't often feel at movies at all. I mean, I watch a lot of movies, but this one, it immediately just transported me, to use a word that you love. The bright colors, the lighting, frankly, the technical piece of this movie is incredible, and we could go on forever celebrating just that. Things like this scene right here, this amazing choreographed number, they actually shut down the Los Angeles freeway to do this. So you could have been driving by and seen this happening, and I just can't imagine what that would have been like. There's a scene in the jazz club where Mia's dancing while Seb is playing jazz, and the camera is panning back and forth. And that's actually a person who is having the director tap his shoulder in time, and he's quickly just going back and forth. So there's an amazing technical quality to this film. The acting, I think we can agree, is pretty stellar across the board.
Gosling never disappoints.
He does not. Emma Stone won Best Actress for this. I think that her facial expressions and her gestures really are something in this. They bring a ton of emotion to it. Gosling actually learned to be a jazz pianist, so almost all of the shots, even of his hands, when they pan out to him and it cuts, it's almost always him, which is a pretty incredible thing for someone to do. So I love their chemistry, I love the dancing, I love the choreography. I think it's just a very magical film all the way around, and it gets me in the feels, like is what I care about most. So,
Feeling film. I did notice this time around watching it, I don't know if you guys, I just recently doing a series of podcasts on the films of Edgar Wright. I noticed some of the editing, like close-ups of straws, transitional scenes, just that make those otherwise dull moments very captivating. He actually uses those same techniques, similar.
He does, and he usually there's a duality to them. So there's the moment in the coffee shop where it cuts and it shows like a quick shot of coffee pouring and a glass being put down, and then it does the same exact thing on Seb's portion when he's in his apartment and he's turning on his record player and pouring a cup of coffee. So,
yeah, and I can't argue with the technical beauty of this opening scene, but I don't know, but somewhere between, and I did latch on to moments of this movie, so I'm not saying, as we'll get into, I think there's moments where I definitely did get feels, I did get connections, but even just from the opening song, then to this ending number, which certainly throws many people for a loop, if they are not expecting maybe the typical ending. It has one foot in modern reality for me, and before I went to see it, I remember hearing that it was this wonderful throwback to the classics, and I also heard the phrase "a love letter to Hollywood," and you just take the opening number, and this is where it starts to get me a little bit, because it's the opening number: climbing those hills, I'm reaching for the heights, chasing all the lights that shine, and when they let you down, you'll get up off the ground, because morning rolls around and it's another day of sun. Chasing all the lights that shine, lights that let you down, and then you get up the next day and do this again. This is where part of what the movie's celebrating kind of gets to me under my skin, because that's what Solomon's talking about in Ecclesiastes, right? When he says, he's talking about the futility of pleasure. He says, my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I didn't withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased, because of all my labor, and this was my reward for my labor. And he says, I considered my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity, striving after the wind, and there is no profit under the sun. And so I'm looking at this love letter to Hollywood, but I'm also looking at the culture of Hollywood, and it's set in modern day, and it's like this celebration of meaninglessness. Right? It's undeniably catchy and well choreographed, kind of like a song like Frozen in the middle of the movie, that then you realize is totally not something you should be celebrating. But it's trying to get me to buy into the Hollywood mythology of fame and chasing that wind. And we have a movie that celebrates it at the expense of relationships and love. So, Aaron, don't you think in some ways it's kind of a self-indulgent exercise in Hollywood patting itself on the back?
Maybe. You could see it that way. You would see it wrong, but you could see it that way. So I go here. Anytime I see passion and creativity at work, I think of movies like Chariots of Fire, where people are using their God-given talents, and in that case, it's very bluntly using it to glorify God. But
evangelist music.
Exactly. Yeah, well, that wouldn't have made this much better. That would have been really weird. And so I feel that a passion in the film exists in the filmmaking. It exists in the artistry of this, and it exists in the characters who are passionate about what they love. Now, there's a dark side to that ambition, right? It's apparent. And in this movie, it seems to willingly look away from it at times and focus on achieving that fame or that goal instead. And it is a choice between inner and outer success that's kind of false, because ultimately neither is going to bring happiness. And true freedom is found in abandoning the pursuit of fame entirely and just being content with the work, whether anyone ever appreciates you or not.
Yeah, we call that a hobby, right?
Well, I think...
Now I'm heading below the belt.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a bit of a theological course correction, though, that we can gain from artists. So every artist that I've ever admired in this discipline will tell you the same thing. Love the work itself and get up and do it every day because you love it, and you take whatever opportunities may come your way. And, Ecclesiastes also has verses that speak to this. It says, I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun, but to eat and drink and be joyful.
Touché.
For this will go with him in toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. So if you truly love the work, and no opportunities ever come your way, then in theory, you would still be happy because you're doing what you love. And it also reminds me of Paul's charge to Timothy when he's telling him, and he's likening Timothy's work to that of a soldier doing his duties. I think it's interesting here because he attributes it to an athlete, he compares it to an athlete in training. And Paul specifically says an athlete in training. He doesn't say an athlete in competition. I think that's kind of important. He also compares it to a farmer working diligently in his field. And he tells Timothy that he's called to faithfulness. And he's promised that the Lord would guarantee his work if he is faithful to his calling and his vocation, and if he trusts God to be faithful to him.
Why you be tripping, Aaron? Okay, I be tripping. Now, I I can't argue with that. In fact, there's the great scene where he's telling her to be faithful to it, when he's calling her back to come back for the audition, and telling her it's two different. I guess there's two different ways of growing up to be argued about in this film. Growing up and recognizing that you need to course correct and maybe do something different, and your dream isn't right, or he then makes the same choice, chooses to grow up still being a baby and face the tough part of the audition to get through it. My problem with Mia, I think in specific though, is it only works when we're called to, or we're dreaming about, falls in line with something that's actually healthy, actually good, or for the Christian, actually godly, right? I mean, I get Psalm 37:4 says, everybody's favorite verse, God will give us the desires of your heart, right? But that's always qualified by delight in the Lord. We can use the desire of our heart line or dream to justify chasing whatever we want, including a lot of unhealthy things. And the worship of Hollywood has ruined a lot of lives. There's that scene where she even says, she's like, I just love being around all this stuff. And they watch the one celebrity get out and go out to the car and get in the golf course. It's that celebrity worship that we see going on. For her, at least partially caught up in that. Sebastian even says at one point, it's actually Gosling's wife, Eva Mendes, wrote a line, he wrote the line for him that's in the film. It says they worship everything and they value nothing. There's this scene where it's like she loves to be this, she's caught up in this culture where they worship everything and value nothing. And that's why it comes back to this idea of this being sort of a celebration of Hollywood, but it also, in some ways, seems to recognize a little bit that there's something wrong with Hollywood, but still kind of wants me to buy into it at the same time. I feel like it's doing it two-step, and I'm not sure where it's landed. And that's why it left me certainly a little unsettled. There's that idea, even when they go to the party too. It's like, is the only reason we're going to these parties and interacting with people just social climbing or looking for that? It's self-advancement versus relationship. And again, that's where it starts to change.
Well, as a metaphor, yes, I think we can say that La La Land really is considering dreams here and not relationship as much as it's about a love story. The forefront really ends up being about their dreams. And we may call that, in Christian communities, calling, in my opinion. And it's that passion that God sets in our hearts, whether it be pastoral work or be, podcasting, whatever we do that we pour ourselves, our time, and our effort into, and that we pursue. And so I think that God wants us to pursue those callings and work together, have them work together in our lives and in our relationships. It's true, the virus of fame is everywhere, and it even affects our churches, right? Mia specifically said at one point, she's like, why do you care if people like you? But popularity is a big thing, right? We lust after spotlights, we lust after celebrity, and even in our church, our culture at times moves toward getting a bigger crowd. It's about that popularity that we want. And we've been taught to value that. But Jesus didn't really value popularity. Jesus was all about the least of all of God's people. And the saints were not saints because they were famous and because they were popular. They were saints because they were faithful. And so I think that we are missing that.
Chasing a calling, that's where I guess the film is trying to have this idea of passion. I see how it can relate to calling, but also be stymied by fame. So I can't really argue in specific, but when you talk about Jesus, Jesus' calling and Jesus walking, or even the work of the apostles, to me it still has a context where it's relationship focused. And let's just let the cat out of the bag, right? Because this is what everybody usually wants to talk about is the ending, right? It gets us to relationships. They don't wind up together. How many people, who's excited they didn't wind up together? I don't know. And this is what polarized most people. And I'm not somebody who thinks that there always has to be a happy ending. I actually love a good tragic ending. I feel like they almost gave us a tragic ending, but then they have a smile that belies it, and all of that just felt like a muddy ending to me. And not everyone has to have I love a good tragedy, but it seemed to want me to think it was a happy ending when I don't think it is. And this is when I had my epiphany. We've talked about this before. But how many people have seen the movie Up? Right? This movie is the anti-Up, by very definition. Remember, think about Up. Starts with the montage, and you see these two people that get together, and they have a life together, and they go from young to old. They have a montage at the beginning of the movie instead of the end of the movie. And what happens is, it's one of the sweetest montages, makes me cry every time, right? But the whole point is that they walk through this life together, and they keep talking about having an adventure, and their life together, and they always have their life together, and they never get to the adventure, and the whole point is, at the end, thanks to the adventure. Like, them together was the adventure, and more important than all these crazy ideas that they had. And this movie kind of then turns this on its head and says, so okay, they could have had this life together, and we'll have the montage at the end, but our acting dreams and our club were more important. And all you do is go back to the original song, right? It's kind of prophetic. At the very beginning of the movie, it says, I think about the day I left him at the Greyhound station. He was sweet and it was true. Still, I did what I had to do. I had to go chase my dream in Hollywood, right? And it even says, a technicolor world made out of music and machine. It called me to be on that screen and live inside each scene. Right? If that's an ode to throw, if that's not an ode to just throw away love, something that's true, right? For the siren song of Hollywood glitz and promise, that chase your dream at the expense of relationships, I don't know what it is. What else is it, Aaron?
Well, I think that you're looking at it a little bit too literally, maybe. I mean, you're talking about 17-year-old...
I'm literally looking at it.
17-year-old teenager who's calling it true love that she's leaving to go pursue her dreams. Let's be honest. That may not be the case. And I think it's interesting because Hollywood typically is all about romanticizing and idolizing romantic relationships. That's what love stories are. Musicals, right? They're almost always a love story of some sort. And they usually overlook the dreams and the callings of the individuals. Or they just resolve them in unrealistic ways. And so for me, La La Land it's more unique because I feel like it makes the case that dreams are an important part of your relationships. And they're an equal important part as a relationship. And so it allows these two individuals to affirm each other in their callings, which really, it shows them that they are mature enough to realize that. And I think that it makes the ending even more devastating. And because it's a relatable message, that we can't always have it all, and sometimes we have to choose. And we have to face the consequences of those choices. So, not everyone here married their high school sweetheart, right? And I wonder...
I heard it, praise God.
Exactly, there we go. But I wonder if there's not someone that you remember fondly, that you have no ill feelings toward. If you saw them on the street, you might have a memory in your head, right? You might give them a nod and a smile. And that's as far as it needs to go, because you've now moved on. The ending is definitely divisive. I mean, this is the moment where my daughter actually audibly said no in the crowded theater because it was not the payoff, right, that she wanted from Mia and Seb. This was supposed to be a romance. And we all kind of feel like that. We all want our happily ever after. And I just read it differently, and it's partially due to 13 viewings of the film. I mean, when I walked out the first time, I drove home angry too, okay? So I get it. If this is your first time seeing it, I understand. It takes time to live in this. But to me, Seb going to get Mia with no ulterior motive other than to give her this news and bring her back for an audition that he felt was important for her because he knew it was the dream that she wanted. He knew that was her calling. To me, that's him exhibiting real love. He is sacrificing what he wants for himself to help her pursue what he knows she needs in chasing her dream. And so he doesn't selfishly want to keep her. He wants her happiness more than he cares about what happens to him in their relationship.
Or he subsequently loved his dream too much to go all the way and help her with and go on, right? I think this movie presents a false dichotomy. Here's what I'm talking about. It's a cheat. Like humans are different from animals, right? We know what delayed gratification is about. Right? For the Christian, we put off earthly treasures because we get heavenly ones, and that's a long ways off. But here we have actually the promise of. We even see in the flashback, he could have played some music in Paris. He was already realizing he needed a longer plan, at least 5 years, as we see, to open a club. So the long game could have been played, right? We can put off short-term successes for long-term gains and still get both. So I kind of feel like the movie gives us a false dichotomy. Because it's absolutely possible, especially if she had that, top-of-the-lot actress money now, that they could have invested it in the club. So the idea that had to be sacrificed, like plenty of people put off dreams and hold out strategically for a partner. One puts the other through college, etc., etc. Right? And let's be honest, as much as I think in some ways Mia has the worst form of kind of unhealthy dream and worship in Hollywood, I don't think we'll talk about his jazz stuff in a minute, but right, he is just, she probably has the less healthy focus, but honestly, he's kind of an idiot. I mean, I'm glad, he can't even call her. We don't have cell phones in this reality. Like, just when he can't make it to her play, he couldn't have given her a heads up. He has to show up afterwards. He's a bad communicator. He's communication 101, by the way. Don't just listen to a woman talking to her mom on the phone and then go make large life choices without a conversation. And there's like so many non-conversations happens this movie is starting to get a little CW for me. All the conflict is based on just not actually having one conversation about simple things.
So what you're saying is that the ending is true because they probably weren't good for each other anyway? So it's good. So it worked out the right way. You're conceding. No, seriously though, even if that's true, to me the point is that the relationship is an issue of timing. Things are not right for them in this moment, and it's not necessarily that their pursuit of their individual dreams is incompatible. Because what we see is Mia does get married and has a child, and it displays that she could have her dream in a family. So it's definitely not saying career over a covenanted marriage. It's important, I think, to remember that if we have a high view of marriage, we can't compare what we see in this film to marriage. This is a dating relationship, okay? This is not the same level of commitment. And it is perfectly acceptable for a young unmarried couple in their 20s to break up in order to pursue different careers or to go to different colleges, things of that nature. And so I think life is full of these timing-influenced choices and events. And it's a little bit annoying to me sometimes because I've heard the film kind of accused, if you would, of painting this black and white moral picture. And I don't think that it does. And even if you feel it's kind of forced, like a CW show, in the movie, there comes a point where Mia and Sebastian's choices become very clear, right? Pursue their individual dreams or pursue the dream of their relationship. And I just wholeheartedly believe that the happiness of these two people who clearly love each other in some context, but maybe not in romantic love anymore, it relies for them, their happiness, on more than just being together.
By the way, if Ryan Gosling was going to be in a CW show, I'd watch that every week.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But, so what you're saying is the movie is being so it's kind of deconstructing the fairy tale of happy ending and romance.
Correct.
All right. I might be able to accept that, and I actually appreciate that in other movies. But here's my problem, Aaron.
Just not this one.
Here's my problem. This one is deconstructing the reality of happily ever after relationship endings, while at the same time propping up the fairy tale of success and Oprah-style follow your dreams careerism. Right? I was watching a Chris Rock comedy show a couple weeks ago, and even Chris Rock was telling parents, quit telling your children they can be whatever they want to be. Like, that's when they grow up, they can't all be whatever they want to be when they grow up. Even Chris Rock knows this fairy tale is unhealthy for maturing humans to actually believe, right? 39 other women go home from that audition with the nose. 39 women actually do wind up back in Boulder or Oklahoma or wherever, right? My problem is for this movie, it's trying to it's deconstruction, but also propagating. It's Samba Tapas. It's got the cinematopus going on here. And it's like, pick a team, movie. I'm frustrated Mia worships Hollywood and the unhealthy environment there. But okay, I can, as I mentioned earlier, respect Sebastian's passion a little bit more. Not just because my wife and I have had similar conversations about jazz. But I can respect it in so that she used to hate jazz. She doesn't hate jazz now. But I can respect in some ways his passion is more genuine and is more pure. Except for his native, you can't communicate. Sure. But nobody that's him I can start to, that's where those moments in the movie, end of the first act, when he's talking about jazz, conversation with John Legend, that's when I start to connect with this movie. What about you?
Yes, I mean, I definitely connect with his passion, and I think that this film is definitely talking to us about a question of identity for both of these characters, right? I mean, it comes closer, like I said, to showing us a true selfless love that puts the other person first. That's not always exhibited in many marriages, much less dating relationships. So for these two individuals to do that, I think they fight not just because of miscommunication and these obstacles of their careers, but they fight because they want nothing more than each other to be true to their dreams. Imagine if you would, I mean, Mia and Sebastian fell in love with a certain Mia and Sebastian. When they are no longer that Mia and Sebastian, then that's not who they loved, right? And whether that's right or wrong, we choose to love. We don't necessarily, it's not just an emotion, it's something that we choose to do every day. Mia's upset because Sebastian's no longer doing the thing that he was pursuing, his dream. She loves Sebastian and is pursuing his dreams. And I think that is a big part of what we see in these fights. I also think that, other movies lead me to believe, these romantic films, that our calling can be relationship, but that's not necessarily the case for everyone. I mean, even the Bible specifically does not call us to be in a relationship or marriage with anyone else. It calls us to be in a relationship with Christ, but it doesn't say that I have to marry Mia if I want to play jazz.
You want to marry Mia? That's what I just got out of that.
I mean, I wouldn't say no.
Well, here's where we're going to differ. Because I'm struggling to see it in a different way. I see two people who aren't in love enough with each other to consider sacrificial adjustments that could still keep both things on the horizon for them. Like there could be an alternate route. That's back to that false dichotomy thing. It didn't have to be one or the other. Why didn't he just go to Paris with Mia and then, as we see in the vision, right? Why can't he find fulfillment in a relationship and also pursue his career ambitions? But even more confounding for me, what is the movie trying to even tell me that Sebastian wants? Right? He sings just one thing everybody wants in the bar, right? He says we're all looking for a love. All we're looking for is love from someone else. Like even in the middle of the movie, it's like he's kind of saying this is the human condition. That's what we're looking for. What we really want is this love from someone else. What the heck, man? Like maybe this movie is showing off his short-sightedness, but it smacks of an impatience to me, right? I mean, why? He's like, I have to stay here and sort myself out. Did he? I can admit this. I admit these people in their 20s. You're not wrong. So maybe they didn't have the vision and maturity to sort it out. And the movie's true because we do make those awkward decisions. It's a learning process at that age. But I guess the most important pursuit for the Christian is, you're not wrong, it's relationship with God. I guess. But at the same time, there's that piece I think that we long for in every movie like this, where the first observation God makes about humans too is that it's not good for us to be alone. I say, like he makes that helper suitable. So we see Sebastian grousing to his sister at the beginning about ideas of love, and he complains that she says romance like it's a bad word. I mean, the film never really comes around and gratifies that early conversation to me. It's obvious he longs for it, he sings about it, and between Song of Solomon and Ephesians 5, it's one of the most basic models in which we imitate God's love and character. And so Scripture elevates it to some degree, but it's part of that parcel of the dream. And I guess we even see it's part of Mia's happiness at the end. So I'm frustrated they didn't land the plane more about romance, what it could be. You know? Is it... And I said, the ending then is what's confounding to me and what he's trying to communicate.
Well, I think we're so used to very handheld, direct stories that just travel in one path. Characters aren't really that nuanced, and I think Sebastian is nuanced. When he talks about romance in the early parts of the film, in that scene, he's talking about jazz. He's not talking about love. He's in fact specifically turning her down, saying, I don't want a girlfriend. I don't want a relationship. He has no interest. Multiple times in the film, he expresses that he doesn't have any interest in that. When he sings about it in City of Stars, he's singing with Mia. He is now he has been found himself, like, unexpectedly in a relationship. So, to me, his actions at the beginning, his actions at the end, he's a single man, clearly, frying up some chicken before he goes to work. He's not got a relationship 5 years later. It seems to me he's perfectly content in not needing a relationship, but he felt that when he was in it, which we all do, so that's realistic. It's not necessarily it's not a bad thing. He's confused because we all get confused. But I think we see that he's happy in the end. And Mia is too. I mean, she's got a husband. Some people are very angry that she's married someone else, probably just because they're angry that it's not Ryan Gosling.
But he is a wonder, though.
Which is fair. He is, yeah, that is fair, yeah. But I mean, he must be a pretty awesome guy, right? We see no reason to believe anything else. Her husband seems like a fantastic man and husband. He treats her well. He's sweet, you know. He puts her first.
He's doing that thing he does.
Oh my goodness, yes. So I feel like they both end up with a pretty great life. And we are placing our biases and our desires into our reading of that ending. And where we come from in life affects how we see it. But the movie side, both of these characters seem to be pretty darn happy where they're at.
Possibly. We see Seb has what he wants. But I think we can still argue we don't know if it's going to satisfy long term. We only get 5 years ahead. We don't get the full up-style montage of old age of them in the retirement home.
That's up.
And sometimes when we get there is what we think it is, right? I mean, the movie doesn't show us that, but provided people don't run willy-nilly off to satisfy provided people don't watch this movie and just run willy-nilly off to satisfy their dreams and abandon whoever they're with, I'm okay with the movie raising conversations. Absolutely. Okay? Can we agree it provokes good questions, whether we enjoyed it or not?
Absolutely.
Like, should we aspire to be in a relationship at the expense of our passions? I think that's a fair question, right? It's a fair question for the Christian even. If a Christian's married to somebody who isn't Christian, and the non-Christian actually wants to leave them, Scripture says, let them go. Like, it's one of those few places where actually the end of even a marriage can happen, according to Scripture. They're passionate about Christ first, that can be a deal breaker. Either we're getting into it, and sometimes even in the midst of it. But I think the alternate question is important too, right? Should we aspire to our passions at the expense of relationships? As long as this movie generates that question, okay. But the minute that this movie inspires people because of the smiley ending, well, tragic vision, but then smiles, it's like, well, do I go then sacrifice, do I sacrifice my dream on and my family or wife? Who am I? And am I going to run out because of this movie and sacrifice things on the altar? A pastor can sacrifice his wife and kids on the altar of ministry. Right? It's a dangerous thing when your dream is dominating in an unhealthy way that's out of control. But then again, so some relationships are the same way too. So that's true.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, honestly. At what cost is it worth it to achieve your dream? And can you have equally satisfying success, even different dreams, like love versus success? And I've always thought that the title of this film is interesting, La La Land. Obviously, it's a well-known moniker for Los Angeles, but the director, Damien Chazelle, is so detailed and so specific about what he's doing. And again, his passion for this is dripping in every scene of this film. And so I wonder if there's not something else to that, because we also know the words La La or La La Land as to that guy is living in La La Land, like James right now. And we use it to refer to people who aren't in their right minds, or whose abilities don't match up to their imaginations. And so for me, I've always wondered if Damien Chazelle is trying to kind of play on those words and tell us that Romance is beautiful and wonderful and grand and exciting. That's painted here very vividly. But anyone who thinks that this is the end-all and be-all to life is, you guessed it, living in la-la land. And, even Ecclesiastes 3:11 tells us he has made everything beautiful, what? In its time.
That's true. I think another good question is when does our hobby or passion come into conflict with our relationships? When is it unhealthy? Like, you're not wrong, right? They're young, dumb, in their 20s. Okay, I added dumb, you didn't say that, but right, they didn't chase their dream at the expense of children or even intertwined families. So it's true. They're pretty free to end things as they are without any real damage. So provided somebody actually has their thinking cap on and actually doesn't consume mindlessly, right? They don't justify their own costly dreams that are different from this. I suppose it's a fair discussion to be had. Right? Sometimes our hobby or passion might come into conflict with our relationships. We might be ignoring people, we might be ignoring friends, or family, but a real deconstruction would be somebody giving up their dream for a spouse or parent. Right? And we do see those types of films too. Right? Whether it's the ailing parent or somebody gets extraordinarily sick, somebody gives up, basically has to sacrifice a dream for them to take care of a mother. Like, we have those movies too. So it's not like we're not without those lessons. Mm-hmm. It's not the lesson of this film. That doesn't mean that I can confess that doesn't make it delinquent in and of itself. It's just not that kind of film.
So here's a question: is Sebastian's passion about himself and his own glory? Is that what you think, or do you think it's about jazz?
Here's where I think we can probably find common ground, right? Because this is what I like most about the film. When Hollywood isn't the centerpiece, and kind of in that self-congratulatory way that frustrates me a little bit, Sebastian's passion is not about living the Hollywood dream, it's about jazz. I think I found myself resonating with this in the film a lot more. So it might mean we're about to agree on something.
Yeah, I mean, it does for me. I love one of my favorite lines in the whole movie, if not my absolute favorite line, is the line that Mia says to Sebastian. She says, people love what other people are passionate about. And I think that absolutely rings true in anything. I mean, it goes for Christians, it goes for hobbies, and everything else in our lives, and relationships.
What do you mean, like it's infectious? Or?
Absolutely infectious.
I
don't know. I think that if we were going to talk about what Sebastian loves here, it ends up taking us to a conversation about Keith and the tradition versus revolution nature of jazz.
Well, before they get to Keith, they're talking about, I like it when they're sitting in the club, and he says, he sits down Mia, like he starts explaining what it's like. The jazz is compelling. He says when they hate it, when people say they hate it, they just don't have the context. And honestly, he's so passionate, and he wants to explain to her the context. I couldn't help but think of the word evangelism, because that's what it felt to me like he was doing. And that's where the context of saying, when we are so passionate about something that we have to tell somebody about it. No, the reason is you don't understand it. She says she thinks she hates it. He says even it's not, he's like, you don't have context for it, and if I explain it to you, you'll understand why it works. Like this, I see this with people talking about Christ. Like this, I see the passion of a Christian in here as he's just trying to extol the virtues of jazz. In fact, he even talks about similar. He says, I just think people, they say they hate it, but it's without context. Then he talks about all the people, how they're crammed in a room with 5 different languages, and jazz finally has this exploding. Now they can communicate through jazz. It's like Pentecost. It's like suddenly we're all together, and yet we can all have this shared tongue, right? And it's about how it brings people together. So here, in fact, something that he loves is something that brings people together in this amazing way. So it's both about the music, but also about relationship, also about the way it affects people without selling out. So I can appreciate that. It's the passion many Christians sadly don't have when they want to sit somebody down to actually share the good news. If Christians had as passionate an evangelion, right, and half as much as Sebastian had about jazz, I think we'd have more people in church.
Well,